What I'm going to talk about today is why conservation and good design matter, and then look briefly at the impact of the development boom on London, and then give some examples of new ways of working. So, why do conservation and good design matter? Well, because our history and culture are written in our buildings, spaces, towns and cities, and they're expressions of our values and aspirations. The built environment is a cultural asset, and it's essential to look after it and design it well. So how places are designed and looked after speak volumes about our self-esteem, national and local pride and identity. And I think it will be very interesting to see what historians in the future interpret the values of the last 15 years or so when they look at what's been built, but more of that later. A couple of examples of the sort of thing I'll be talking about. This is Smithfield Market. It's an example of unlisted buildings in a conservation area, and this is the kind of solution English heritage and conservation groups were proposing. This is actually what the city proposed to build, which we didn't think really reflected well on the context. Fortunately, in this case, the Secretary of State agreed with us, and we are now working with the city and the developers to come up with a more appropriate solution. This is about an example of getting it right. You will all be familiar with this, the reading room at the British Museum, where conservation and good urban design have revealed and created a new space within the museum. And thanks to the lottery, of course, there are many other examples in London of similar kind of projects. So looking at historic places and good design, well, Didier's talked about the importance of historic places, the creating a sense of place, the contribution they make to character and distinctiveness, and the range of values they reflect. And this, of course, is St Pancras, our new link with France and Europe, which I think most people would admit is a brilliant fusion of the old and the new. Good design creates value, and a lot of the work that CABE has been done has showed that good design does indeed increase economic value as well as senses of well-being and quality of life. And good design is not just about looking good, although that can be important. It's about how well places work, how well they function. And this example is of Culverin Court and Mount Carmel School in Islington, which is a new housing scheme built with an understanding of the context. It's part of the Arsenal Stadium redevelopment scheme, the relocation of the stadium. And this features in the publication that EH and CABE have done on buildings in context, and it's a good example of using context. I suppose my position as an English Heritage Commissioner and a CABE Commissioner is that I believe that good conservation and the historic environment should inform good design, that distinctiveness and understanding of character should be the starting point of good design. Conversely, good design should inform the sort of conservation we do. It's all about how we create great places. Of course there are conflicts, but the conflicts ought to be about balance, not about some fundamental distinction between design in one silo and conservation in another. And that's my sort of mission, to reduce conflict between the two. So looking at London, well, of course, London is such a dynamic city, and it's the only world city with such an extensive and rich historic environment. The challenge, which you'll all be familiar with, is how do we accommodate the growth needed by a dynamic, competitive city with a global reach without destroying the very character that makes it such a special place, makes it a great place to live, work and do business in. And, you know, fundamentally, how do we successfully create new interventions in old places? And this is the this is the challenge in London. But of course, change is part of what London's all about. It's not, excuse me, it's not a set piece like Paris. Part of the drama and character of London is the juxtaposition between the old and the new. But many overseas visitors think there's no plan to London, but of course it's carefully planned chaos. It's no accident that you can see St Paul's from Primrose Hill. The reason that my former workplace, Eland House, has a sloping roof is not because the architect thought it would be a good idea. It's because it's in the viewing corridor of the Dome of St Paul's from King Henry's Mound in Richmond Park. And somebody in a conservation group whose mission in life is to make sure that that view is never breached had spotted that the original proposal would in fact interrupt that view. So there's more planning to London than perhaps the casual observer might be aware of. But London's a city of immense variety. And here are just three examples. A suburban street in Upminster, the Icicum Flats in Camden, which is a seminal piece of modernist design, built in the 1930s. And after many years, this Grade 1 building was restored in 2003 and 4 as key worker shared ownership flats with some private housing. And St Luke's Old Street, another great example of an old building brought into use, in this case, as a concert hall and community facilities. So, as I say, I think the challenge is how do we keep and reuse the best of the old, and how do we allow for new interventions? So, how have we done? Well, you'll have your own opinions. I think at the end of this most incredible, unparalleled period of development in London, it's now a good time to take stock. From Big Bang to Big Crunch. Well, there's been the good. Some great conservation, which I've already mentioned. Here's Somerset House, which I'll actually refer to later, and the Gherkin, 30 St Mary Axe, which genuinely has become an icon of London. It features on the postcards along with telephone boxes and the rest of it. So, the good, and many, many examples, of course. The bad. And you're all, I don't know where these places are because they could be absolutely anywhere. They're all housing schemes, and I think what's been particularly disappointing over the last 15 to 20 years is the poor standard of so much house building in this country. It's been really very, very disappointing. The whole model has been build them as cheap as possible, sell them off, walk away. And CABE has done a series of housing audits around the country. Actually, London and the South East came out better than other areas, but even so, less than 25% of the private housing stock that we surveyed was classified as good under the Building for Life criteria. So 75% is mediocre at best or poor. So I think this is a real challenge, and of course in London it's not just this kind of development, it's been the ubiquitous sort of medium rise or higher rise buy-to-let flats and all the rest of it.